unfortunate part that's being left out is infrastructure and capitalism in America. If you made an anti-Semitic record, it would never see the light of day. If you talked about any group, the Greeks, the Italians, and if you did anything disparaging to any of those groups as blatantly as we do to ourselves, they would say corporate responsibility, the record label would drop you, they put you down. The minute you do black on black, it's free speech. So what happens is, and the blessing in living through that early year stuff was being able to see something come out of nothing, to see everybody say it wouldn't happen, and to be able to use your creativity to make it manifest. The curse that happened was, by the time it got to the space where you could really make money to actually make a living off of, the powers that be, so to speak, the record labels, corporate America has a habit. If you look at NFL, you look at the NBA, back in the day, and again, it's the double-edged sword of corporate America, because 90% of us in a capitalist society want to, quote unquote, live better. And this is what I meant by the trauma of poverty. If you look at the 60s, I'm very clear, I'm 50. So what I'm saying is, I lived through the turn of the 60s into the 70s. I saw it go from slacks, high water pants, sharkskin, to bell bottoms. So we had the Black Panthers on one side, and we also had the pimp on the other side. So there was always this dichotomous energy in our neighborhood. So while the Black Panther rhetoric is happening, the pimp styling is what the most fashion is. So the loud colors, the lifts and the high waters or whatever, the bell bottoms and all of that, that was quote unquote pimp wear for the most part. So even terms like pimp become a term of endearment simultaneously with my nigga and all of that. So when you start to look at what's happening in the culture and what's being defined as cool, there's a certain level of the underculture or the subculture that is defining it. And I think the biggest problem I've always had is when we say they and those people. We always play to the lower end of ourselves because we don't believe in the higher end. There's way more of us in college than there are in jail. So when we buy into the mythology of, well, I'm doing what the people want, I'm like, well, what group of people are you talking about? I mean, nobody even wants to talk about the boule, not that I'm supporting that side either, but there's a segment of Black America that's very, very Huxtable-esque and don't really want to associate with the certain kind of black. So that side of the equation, which has done as much damage, in my opinion, in terms of not embracing and not financing and not coming forward. One of the things I always wanted to say to Oprah Winfrey back in the day was, you don't counter negative quote-unquote rap as you see it by not playing it. You counter it by playing positive soul rap. So what started to happen was when Public Enemy, and I remember this vividly, my album was called Knowledge is King. It was going into a whole spiritual space about knowledge and being intelligent. KRS-One was saying Jesus was black. And Public Enemy was saying it takes a nation of millions to hold us back. That's all 88, 89, and by the time we got to 90, the powers that be said this black conscious movement is moving without radio play, it's moving completely underground, and there's an underground subculture of positive, pro-black, intelligent people. We cannot have this movement happening. So the unfortunate part for gangster, quote-unquote gangster rap was, they started to handpick what they were going to play. And this is the part that you know. They went from not playing rap because they said it was too edgy and not melodic enough to playing the most profane rap and beeping the curses out. That's how bad they wanted to get that content on the radio. So you heard a record, and we gonna party, you couldn't even hear what they were saying, but everybody knew the record was hot. And what started which I have to say, the fake East Coast, West Coast thing, because they also sensationalized that. They didn't know that Ice Cube was cool with PE. We were cool with NW. We knew them. So when we started seeing magazines saying East Coast versus West Coast, it was the birth of Tupac and Biggie and that specific situation that made them be able to take that and use the press to say, there's a battle. I'm like, yo, we don't have anything against them, but we're not being heard. Not only that, the elders, the older guys, especially the Grandmaster Flashes and the Melly Mel's and myself and all of those guys that came before those guys, we were basically saying, damn, the youngins don't see what's happening. But now they're neutralizing us because not only do we understand the business, we also understand the power of the content. Melly Mel had a record called The Message, one of the biggest records in the history of hip hop. Don't push me because I'm close to the edge. It was the first time even to hear the word called The Message. We started realizing we could reach each other. So what started happening is they would take little excerpts, and I remember doing this, giving a long interview, and they took one little part that I said about what I thought about gangster rap and then tried to use it like that was the context of what I was talking about. And I said, when Ice Cube said, we made a record called Self-Destruction, which is a whole nother issue, Stop the Violence. We made this record kind of like our hip hop, We Are the World. The West Coast did one called We All in the Same Game. They saw us going in those directions, and once again, they started to divide from a publicity standpoint. Well, the East Coast said their record is better. They started using little petty things like of that nature to really, really get us in a space where we didn't understand from a conscious standpoint. So when I talk about capitalism from an infrastructure, now you have a situation where these guys, no financial advisors in our community, nobody in our family that ever made money, but the first ones that make money, nobody's telling us about taxes or any of that situation, and you now create a lifestyle that you have to try to keep up with. So when you hand your record in, the label says, we don't have anything for radio. Translation, give us something that we will spend money on to promote, because they spend money. The thing about the industry that nobody says, the ugly truth is, there's nothing on the radio that hasn't been paid for. So that was an investment. So the part that we're really, really underestimating is, if you had PE over here and you had Biggie over here, you're going to say we're going to put more money into Biggie because we understand his content. And this is back to freedom of speech without question. I love a lot of what Biggie did. I love a lot of what NWA did, but they started to make us one-dimensional. So instead of seeing that there was the Black Panther and the Mac, they started only showing the Mac. And once you only show the Mac, the next great wave of people that come up, because all of us from hip hop come through rites of passage. We all look at who we focus on. And Rakim came after me. Like you talk to Rakim or Big Daddy Kane and those guys or whatever, they feel like you say, that I'm the lyricist that they focused on. But then when you get to Tupac and Biggie, they focus on Rakim and Kane and Kool G Rap. When you get to Jay-Z, he focused on, that's how it goes in hip hop. So whatever wave is working, the next wave is sharpening their skills to do what the last wave did. And when they saw quote unquote what they label gangster rap working, it got to a point where whether New York wanted to accept it or not, the West Coast music was more dominant in terms of sales, in terms of imagery, in terms of everything that was happening. So when Biggie came, it was kind of like New York's final answer to be able to get into that kind of vibration. And once that worked, it was basically game on, because not only did he have the imagery, he had the skill set, he had lyrics, he had whatever, and then the final page, they started not even investing in the real MC. They started taking money out of hip hop altogether, which is the birth of the hustler. Because the hustler has the money. He's not working at UPS. He takes his own money, goes into the studio, invests in himself, and then takes that same money, go to the radio station. We all knew the DJs. I took my record to Mr. Magic back in the day. And he would put it on the air. We sit there and take the calls or whatever. That's how you knew you were hot. Jay-Z makes a record. He takes it down to Flex. Give him whatever you want to give him to play it. Flex will play it all night. And the next thing you know, you're creating this momentum because it's back to the whole situation that happened. So there's a truth in the equation that a lot of people don't want to talk about in terms of the money side of the investment. And once that starts to happen, you get a space where now guys that aren't really MCs or aren't really creative people are saying, hey, is there a guy in our crew that can rhyme that we can put money into? And now my crew is this. And now once the hustler became the in-fashion thing to do, that was the thought process, because it's as American as anything else. If you go back to Prohibition all the way through, it's exactly what it is. You take your money, you invest in yourself, and you make your own way, so to speak. So that's no disrespect to Jay-Z or any other person that came through, but that was the industry intentionally making sure we're going to shut down. The average guy that's in college, he can't afford to go into the studio. But the hustler is going to come, and we know what that content is going to be. So we'll embrace that, and it's an easier way because we didn't write those rhymes. He came and brought this to us on a platter. So at the end of the day, that's what I say, is the infrastructure of capitalism that basically sets the paradigm and sets the tone. And once you're in a space where you had a little money, anybody that's lived it, you do not want to go back. So you're trying to do whatever you can to keep your deal, to keep yourself in a situation. And the label is basically saying, again, there's a group of people sitting at a table that don't come from where we come from saying, I don't think the hood will buy that. Really? Like, well, based on what? Have you been in the club? Have you been in the... No, I just don't think so. What about this record, nigga, nigga, nigga? Now that I think they'll like. And at the end of the day, they put the money behind that.
Thank you.